Counter-Narrative News, bringing you daily news today on Tuesday, the 14th of February 2023. Going to Palestine, the far-right regime in Tel Aviv has announced more plans to build settlements in the occupied West Bank. These plans would be illegal, as are all the settlements in the West Bank. There are currently 140 of them, housing some 600,000 colonial settlers. This new call comes after an attack by a Palestinian, which has resulted in the deaths of 3 Israelis in Jerusalem, 2 children and an adult. That itself has to be put into context of Israel's fastening pace of oppression, which results in killing and injury, particularly in the West Bank, in their near daily colonial army raids there, which results in the deaths of resistance fighters, children, older women, civilians, and others. It seems what's happening here with the Tel Aviv far-right government is that they are trying to quote-unquote prove that their approach is having some returns and has some kind of sustainability going forward. It remains to be seen if that's going to be the case. It's highly unlikely, because the Palestinians, in their response to this colonial increased oppression, has been one of tenacious resistance on all levels. And considering that's going to be the case going forward, it's very clear that this new push of vicious colonial settlement violence by the Israeli regime is going to fail. Going to Iran, the president of Iran, Raisi, is on a visit to China. It's the first of its kind in the last 20 years. He takes with him senior members of the Iranian government. And really, China needs Iran in terms of its supplying of gas and oil. And Iran definitely needs China in relations to its economic investments, although Chinese investments into Iran remains at a relatively low level of around $160 million a year, which is less than what China invests in places like Afghanistan and other places. China has supported Iran's entry into the Shanghai Cooperation Organization multilateral body, perhaps arguably to balance out some other states, not least Russia, whereas China and Russia are seen and have a quite deep strategic alliance. They are still very much awkward allies with a lot of contradictions and tensions there, historic ones and more contemporary ones. The visit by the Iranian leadership to China doesn't really offer any inspiration, as Iran is involved in the Ukraine conflict by supplying somewhat deceitfully its military drones to the Russian leadership, which are using them to kill civilians in its project of occupation and annexation in Ukraine, and conduct collective punishment by means partly of these drones as well. The Iranian state internally in Iran is in a state project of deploying its security apparatus against women and girls around policing violently as to what they should wear, arguably a form of state-sanctioned and led project of violent misogyny against the country, including the protest movement in support of women who want to decide what to wear on top of their heads or not. Also, Iran continues to spread its version of right-wing narrow nationalism, which has led to dozens of former Iranian regime people protesting that the state has been quote-unquote hijacked by an extremist far-right nationalist leadership in alliance with the far-right leadership in Russia under Putin and Alexander Dugin, which the Iranians seem to be in a junior relationship with, having added this white nationalist senior relationship to the already relationships to far-right nationalist leaders of, for example, of David Duke, the former Grand Wizard of the KKK. Also, Iran continues to spread its version of narrow nationalism as well, and creates incredible opportunistic disasters, including its support for the NATO proxies and the NATO campaign against Libya, which destroyed Libya in 2011. Interestingly, the Iranian state news platform Press TV seems to have redacted, that is, erased its previous positions on that conflict, in which they called the NATO destruction of Libya the quote-unquote Islamic awakening. So there's nothing really particular inspiration from the Iranian side and from the Chinese side. Also nothing particularly interesting there that can inspire people towards any kind of justice to the oppressed masses across the world, or even in China. However, one has to oppose the growing war noises against China coming from the West, and now Britain has chimed in with the ridiculous episode of the US shooting down the Chinese balloon and now the UK is arguing that it needs to review its security situation vis-a-vis Beijing. All of this has to be opposed by those who stand for peace and justice in the world, despite the nature of Beijing. Going to interesting development, the well-respected US-based journalist Seymour Hersh, now who's quite elderly, in his late 80s, has written an article claiming that the Nordstream pipelines was blown up by Washington, basically. The article doesn't seem to be fact-checked, and it seems to be relying on one source. However, it remains the case that of all the likely candidates, the US probably topped the list of those possibly being responsible for the destruction of Nord Stream. In 26th of September last year, in 2022, both Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2 basically became inoperational as a result of explosions. In 2021, 45% of all Europe's gas imports was from the Nord Stream itself. So what it indicates is a strong strategic alliance from Europe, particularly Germany, with that of the Moscow regime. If the US did blow up Nord Stream, what it points to is several things. First of all, that the US can conduct strategic state terrorism, negatively impacting its primary global allies in Germany and the European Union, that it can get away with it, that Germany and Europe will accept the result of that action, i.e. US forcing a closer relationship to Germany and Europe by means of destroying the Nord Stream and cutting that particular type of relationship, that political, economic, energy relationship between Europe and Russia on the other hand. And that the bigger picture here is that the leading European neocolonial powers went to world war twice in the last century, two world wars separated only by a few decades, after which they built a political, cultural, military and economic infrastructure, or many infrastructures globally, to ensure that never happens again, that they stay united and they fend off any other global competitors. With the possibility of Nord Stream being destroyed by the United States, it points to the fact that Europe is never going to be a quote-unquote counterbalance to US global interests, but actually the US and Europe are closely aligned going forward and are not going to allow any contradictions to turn into antagonism leading to a world war. Rather, they're going to focus their world wars, quote unquote, in opposition and pushing back those emerging global competitors, which right now is Russia, and also they're ensnaring China in that strategy. And then what this all points to, that the Chinese and the Russian states and other states have since the Second World War tried to bank on supporting Europe as a quote-unquote counterweight to US. Well, that is just not going to happen. That's not the case. That Western imperialism is a lot more united, and very much so because of the way they've instrumentalized Ukraine this last year and the way the Russian leadership have foolishly entered into that entrapment. Finally, going over to Mozambique and Africa. Recently, the German ambassador there, Lothar Freischleder, has commented on criticized corruption of the Frelimo Mozambican state. This has led to President Felipe Nyusi slapping back the German ambassador, admonishing the ambassador and demanding respect for Mozambique's sovereignty. President Nyusi has also been the chairman of the regional body of SADC, the South African Development Community, has managed during his presidency to achieve a lasting peace agreement with long-standing political military opposition by Renamo, but also has faced a whole bunch of other problems, not least the growing poverty in the country year upon year, the violent destabilization in the north by means of Daesh infiltration there as well, and ongoing economic problems of unemployment and other issues. That was Counter Narrative News, bringing you daily news today. We thank all of those who continue to support us. Please do encourage others to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Twitter on counter_CNN. We wish you a fantastic day.